In this last video in our sequence about introducing NumPy, I want to really only spend about half the time on NumPy. The other half I want to introduce how you can raise errors. And then this is really helpful when you're writing a function to be able to raise an error if something goes wrong. So here I want to raise an error if the input is not a NumPy array, or if one of the values is not 0 or 1. So here I've made ARR. Let's look at it. And if I check what's the type of ARR, I get a NumPy ND array. And so if we want to check, is the type of the input ND array, you could do equals np.nd array, but I think I've literally never seen that before. Instead, what is typically used is the built-in Python function isinstance. And this is slightly different than using type equals, but this is the way that's almost always used in practice, because in practice, you usually don't care that the type is exactly a NumPy array. Usually it's enough to know that it's built off of a NumPy ND array. So we can do isinstance ARR ND, or not ND array, np.nd array. Okay, and there we get true. If we do isinstance ARR list, we get false because it's not an instance of a list. Okay, great. So here we want to say if, and now I want to know if it's not an instance. So isinstance ARR np.nd array. And this will be our first time in this class raising an error, at least with Python. And the way we do that is sometimes I make a mistake and I type return, but that's not right. You type raise, and then you say the type of error you want to raise. So in this case, it's going to be a type error. Okay, and don't worry about what these are. The important thing is some kind of error, and then parentheses, and then inside the parentheses, you can give an error message. So for example, you can say input should be a NumPy array. Yeah, let's try it like that. So if we try to bin ARR, okay, that works. If I try to bin, how about the list version of ARR? Okay, then I get an error. It's a type error. And the type error message I get is exactly what we wrote. Input should be a NumPy array. So that was half of what I wanted to do. The other half is I want to know, or I want to make sure all of the values are zeros and ones. So how can I do that? Again, let's do it outside of the function definition to start. So I can say ARR equals 0. Okay, that gets me a Boolean array. I can do ARR equals 1. Okay, that gets me a Boolean array. And if I do ARR equals 0, ARR equals 1. Okay, and what do I want to put here? Well, I want to make sure all of these values are either 0 or 1. So I should put a vertical line here for OR. And because it was a well-chosen, or like a proper NumPy array, then we get all of these trues. And here, if I do .all afterwards, then I get true. So if this happens, I'm happy. So let's say if, and then, so if this happens, I'm happy. So let's actually put a not here. Okay, you could have put a tilde. This has just made the single Boolean true. So to me, it seems like it makes more sense to write not, because this is like a Python thing. It's not like a NumPy thing, this single Boolean value true. Okay, and so if that is not true, raise when the type isn't really wrong, it's more the value that's wrong. Okay, and I've just looked up what are the different errors. Okay, and these are two of them. And let's say all entries should be 0 or 1. Okay, and let's try it again. So ARR is a good input, so it should not raise an error. Good. And let's make something new. ARR2 equals ARR. Okay, so I've made a second version of ARR, and let's go ahead and put a 6 into this. So let's go to the 5th row, the second column. Oh, and this is supposed to be an ARR2. Let's put a 6. Okay, so let's look at ARR2. So here we went to the 5th row, the second column, and put in a 6. Okay, so this should raise a value error. So 2 binary ARR2. Okay, I get this value error, and it says all entries should be 0 or 1. And let me show you something kind of strange. What happens if I do 2 binary ARR? I also get a value error. And so why is that? Well, let's look at ARR. And so the problem is that when you do something like this, ARR2 equals ARR, it's actually the exact same NumPy array. So any change I make to ARR2 is going to be reflected back in the original one. So if you really want to be able to change things in the new one without changing the old one, you should use the copy method. Okay, so for example, I can do ARR3 equals ARR.copy. And if I look at ARR3, it's the same as ARR. And let's do ARR3, and let's go to the 6th. Let's go to the 6th row. And let's, just for the fun of it, go every other column. Okay, so start at 0, go to the end, go up by 2, and let's set these equal to 99. Okay, if I look at ARR3, okay, we set this one and this one to be 99. But if I look back at, I made it from ARR, so if I look back at ARR, that one did not get changed. And the reason was because when I created ARR3, I used this .copy method. So that was like a totally new NumPy array, as opposed to a reference back to the original NumPy array.